Do you ever feel frustrated because it takes so long to learn scales? I remember learning scales and wanting to quit because it is so much to remember to learn so many different scales. But then I discovered an exercise that changed my life, and I was able to learn almost any scale easily and quickly. In this lesson, I'm going to teach you this exercise, and I promise by the end of the lesson, learning scales will be easier than ever. Now, if you were like most students, you were told to learn your major scales like this. You were told, okay, the key of C major has all white notes, and here's the fingering. You're gonna go 1, 2, 3, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then you learn your fingering for the left hand, and then you play your hands together, up and down the scale, and then you're taught a new scale. So the key of E flat major. Well, what's the key signature for E flat? Well, there's 3 flats. So here's the notes of the scale, and then here's the fingering for this scale, and then you gotta do the different fingering in the left hand, and then you put your hands together, right? And so this is the traditional way that most students are taught scales. And there's nothing inherently wrong with this traditional method of learning scales. However, there are 3 major challenges with the traditional method. First, you have to learn a different key signature for each scale. Second, you often have to learn a different fingering for each scale. And third, it's hard to see the relationship between each of the scales. And I have great news for you. There is actually a much easier way to practice your major scales. But before I teach you, if you're enjoying this lesson, please hit the like button. And if you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe for more videos just like this. The solution to this traditional way of practicing scales is what I call the fixed finger exercise. With this exercise, you don't have to memorize a different key signature for each scale. You don't have to learn a different fingering for each scale. And you can easily see the relationship between all of your scales. So you ready to learn the exercise? The first step is to learn the 4 C blocks. And this is super important because you might realize someday after you've learned a number of your scales that you can play a majority of your major scales with your thumb on the C. And so if you learn the 4 C blocks, you will actually have learned 7 of your scales. You'll understand exactly what I mean a little bit later, but I want you to trust me through this process. It will make sense as we put the pieces together. So the first C block has these 3 notes, C, D, and E. And this block is used on 2 different major scales, your C major scale and your F major scale. Your second C block has these 3 notes, C, D, and E flat, and these notes are used on 2 major scales, B flat and E flat. Your third C block uses these 3 notes, C, D flat, and E flat, and this block is used on 2 major scales, A flat and D flat. Finally, your fourth C block uses these 4 notes, C, D, E, and F sharp. And this is the only C block that uses 4 notes. The rest use 3 notes. And this C block works on your G major scale. So here's the amazing thing. With just these 4 C blocks, 1, 2, 3, and 4, you've actually learned 7 partial scales. You've learned C major, D flat major, E flat major, F major, G major, A flat major, and B flat major. And so I encourage you to actually play this as an exercise. C, D flat, E flat, F, G, A flat, B flat. Now, I know it sounds kind of weird, but I promise this will lock in for you after the next step when I teach you your F blocks. By the way, you can download and print the lesson sheet music, and you can change the key of this entire lesson with the click of 1 button with our smart sheet music, so I'll put a link to all of that below. All right, step 2 is to learn the 5 F blocks, and this block will complete each of your 7 scales. So block number 1 has these 4 white notes, F, G, A, and B, and this block works with your C major scale. Block number 2 uses these 4 notes, F, G, A, B flat, and this block works with 2 different scales, your F scale and your B flat major scale. For block number 3, we're gonna move the A down to the A flat, and this works with 2 major scales, E flat and A flat. For block number 4, you're gonna move the G down to a G flat, and these 4 notes work with your D flat major scale. Finally, your 5th block uses these 4 notes. It's quite a bit different than your other blocks, and for this block, you're actually gonna start with your forefinger on the F sharp. So your thumb is what's gonna start on the G and play these 3 notes. And this block is used for the G major scale. And once again, with these 5 F blocks, you've now just learned 7 partial scales: C, D flat, E flat, F, G, A flat, and B flat major. Now you can also practice an exercise with these 5 blocks. You're gonna start on your F and play C major, then D flat major, changes, E flat major, F major, G major, you gotta use the forefinger, sounds a little different, A flat major, and B flat major. And if you speed it up, you can turn it into a nice little exercise. C, D flat, E flat, F, G, A flat, B flat. All right, now that you've learned your C blocks and your F blocks, you can easily put them together and practice your full scales. And this is where it's gonna actually sound good, because you're gonna hear the full scale locked in with each of your chords from these scales. So here's how you do it. We're gonna start with the C chord in our left hand, and we're gonna play the C major scale using our 2 blocks. So let's start up here, C, D, E, and block number 2, F, G, A, B, and C. Come down, standard notes of the C major scale, 3, 2, 1. And after the C, I like to add one little note here to finish off the measure, and then here's the really cool part. From here, we're gonna go to D flat and play the D flat major scale starting on C using our blocks. So for the first block, we have C, D flat, E flat. For the F block, F, G flat, A flat, B flat, C. And then we bring this down, same fingering, all the way down to the C, add one extra note to complete the measure, and then we go to the key of E flat. There's our bottom block, top block, bring this down, same fingering, add one note, and then we're gonna go to F. You see what's happening? Play the blocks. There's the F block, and then add the D, and then the G. There's that F sharp, thumb on the G, bring it down, same fingering, then 2 more to go, A flat, ooh, it changes, D flat. Here's our F block, see that? Bring it down, and the final one is B flat, there's the block, makes sense? And then we end on C. So what we just did is pretty incredible. We just practiced 7 major scales, but we weren't thinking necessarily of a key signature. We were thinking of each of these blocks and the scales that are associated with each of these blocks. Also, we're not thinking about the fingering for each scale, which is pretty amazing, because if you learned your D flat major scale the traditional way, you might learn that this scale starts on a 2 finger. And if you learn the A flat major scale, you'd learn that this scale starts on a 3 finger. And so with this fixed finger exercise, you can practice 7 different scales, and they all start on one note, the C. And this is why I call this a fixed finger exercise, is because you don't have to move your thumb off of the C to learn 7 different scales. The third advantage of the fixed finger exercise is that you can easily see the relationship between each of your scales by the notes that you change in each of your blocks. Now, I do encourage you to practice this exercise at a faster speed. So you start on C, D flat, E flat, F, G, A flat, B flat, C. Now, the amazing thing with this exercise is that you can use it on almost any scale. So for example, if you took your minor scale, like C minor, you could play this scale up and down. And when you get back down, you can play all of the other minor scales that share a C in the scale. Now, you might realize there's a little bit of a problem, and that is not every scale has the C in it. In fact, there are 5 other major scales that you did not cover in this exercise. So if you want to be able to practice all 12 of your major scales, then you need to also learn your B blocks and your E blocks. Now for this section, we're going to go a little bit faster because a lot of these ideas will be familiar to you, except we're going to be learning them in some different block positions. And so there are basically 2 B blocks. Your first block uses these 3 notes, B, C sharp, and D sharp. And this block works over 3 different major scales: your B major scale, your E major scale, and your F sharp major scale. Your second B block uses these 3 notes. So you're going to move that D sharp down to D, so you have the notes B, C sharp, and D, and this block works over the keys of D major and A major. So with these 2 B blocks, you've actually learned 5 partial scales: B, D, E, F sharp, and A. So let's play each of your B blocks over each of these root notes to represent these keys. We have B major, D major, E major, F sharp major, and A major. And you can speed this up as an exercise: B, D, E, F sharp, A. The next step is to learn your 4 E blocks. And so E block number 1 is going to use these 4 notes. We have E, F sharp, G sharp, and A sharp. Now this block is used on the B major scale. Block number 2 uses these 4 notes: E, F sharp, G, and A, and this is used on the D major scale. Block number 3 uses these 4 notes: E, F sharp, G sharp, and A, and this is used on 2 major scales: your E major scale and your A major scale. Your 4th block uses these 4 notes. You have an E sharp, you have F sharp, G sharp, and A sharp, and this one is used on your F sharp major scale. So with these 4 E blocks, you've actually now learned 5 partial scales: B major, D major, E major, F sharp major, and A major. Let's play the blocks with each of these keys. So we have our B block, our D block, E block, F sharp block, sounds kind of strange, and then our A block. And if you speed this up, it works really well as an exercise: B, D, E, F sharp, A. By the way, if you want to learn all 12 of your major and minor scales, you want to learn all of your major and minor chords, you want to learn how to play chord progressions in various keys, and you want to learn how to read lead sheets in any key, I recommend that you check out our Level 1 Foundations learning track. You will learn all of the foundations of the piano, how to maneuver around the keyboard, the best exercises to get started playing the piano, so I'll put a link to that below. All right, the final step is to combine your B and your E blocks to play these 5 major scales. So you're gonna play a B major in the left hand. We're gonna start up high and play our B major scale. Block number 1, the E block. Bring it up and down. We're gonna add the little filler note here, and then now we're gonna go to the key of D major, but stay on the B and play your B block on the D. So we have now E, what's our E block? Ah, there it is, okay? We're gonna bring it down. We're gonna add the little filler note. Now the E block, and we're starting on B. So here we go. thumb on the E, bring it up, making sense. Bring it down, add the filler note, and our F sharp block, here it is. Thumb under to the E sharp. Remember this one? We bring it down, we add the filler note, we're almost done. A major is our next block, and then to E. Okay, bring it down, and add the filler note on the C sharp, and the final chord is B major, and we end on our B major chord. Now I recommend that you speed up the exercise, and so you would play it like this. B, D, E, F sharp, A, and then B. And now you've practiced all 12 of your major scales, and remember that you can practice 7 of your major scales with a thumb on C, and you can practice 5 of your major scales with the thumb on B. And the amazing thing, once again, is that as you practice these scales on your B block, you're not necessarily having to think of the key signature, but instead on each of the notes in these blocks. You also don't have to think of the fingering for each of these scales because the fingering is the same. And lastly, it's very easy to see the relationships between these scales as you shift some of the notes in each of these blocks. I also want to mention that the fingering that you used on a couple scales from this exercise is not the traditional fingering that you would normally learn for these scales. For example, on the D major scale, the standard fingering for this scale is to actually have your third finger on the B. Except on the exercise, we had our thumb on the B. Same with our A major scale. Normally A major is played thumb, like this. And on this exercise, we actually put our thumb on the B. And I share this with you because there are multiple valid ways of playing the fingering on a given scale. For example, on the D major scale, you can use the traditional fingering, or you could use this alternate fingering. Okay? So keep this in mind. Some teachers would say, no, you need to learn the scale with this fingering, but the truth of the matter is that sometimes you're going to want to change the fingering of a given scale depending on what you're trying to play at the piano. The last thing I want to mention is that this exercise does not account for playing scales in your left hand. It mostly focuses on your right hand for the purpose of playing melodies and soloing, but just keep in mind that this exercise could be expanded to your left hand if you want to practice scales in your left hand as well. Hey, thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the lesson. If you did, please leave a comment and let us know. Also, be sure to check out pianowithjonny.com. We have over 1,000 step-by-step lessons for all playing levels, an awesome learning community. We do live events for our students, so be sure to check it out, and I'll see you in the next one.